Good to go. Oh, hello and good afternoon, and welcome to the Doge and Bunny Show with a side of deer. Number 4, sexist men be crazy. So, I am Brian, and joined by Bunny Blackwell as well as Mr. Teal Deer, and we're going to be looking at an article posted by the Washington Post and the study that the article claims to be using. And the article is entitled Sexist Men Have Psychological Problems. Now, before we get into it, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of backstory. Also, let us know how we sound, if I'm like crazy loud or if whatever. If I am, I apologize. Puerto Ricans are just louder than average people. I don't know if you guys know that, but we just operate at a higher volume. So I'm on this... Go ahead.
You sound like the smoking hot Vice Squad cop. And Teal, as always, sounds like the mad scientist every girl wants to work for, even if he doesn't notice if they're still there or not. And I sound like the Canadian bunny. So
there you go. It says nothing about our volume, but that's a really great way to look at it.
I'm poetic. What can you say?
There you go. Okay, so the way I came across this was I was invited to a Facebook group called Against the Odds, YouTubers Working Together for Men. The group was put together by Chrissy. Chrissy is a YouTuber that appeared on the, you might remember her from the Questions for Anti-SJWs. Her profile picture is a Liechtenstein painting, and Christy Winters was also in that video. Christy Winters is part of this group, and she posted... because she is doing research for some video dealing with men's issues. But Christy often comes at this topic from a, feminist version of men's issues perspective, which involves, toxic masculinity, it's men's fault, and so on. So this is what she wrote when she posted it. Posting because this article deals with men's mental health, an issue this group is committed to working on, right? Please don't shoot the messenger, me, because of the meta-analysis results of the study's finding. So when I saw it, I thought, well, let me take a look at this article because it was entitled Sexist Men Have Psychological Problems. And I thought, well, since Christy Winters is always asking us to do more robust analyses of feminist work, why don't we do something that she claims is good enough or robust enough to use? So that's how we came across this. And I think one of you guys wanted to say something?
No, I'm just listening. Go on.
Okay. Only because I heard like a droning sound of like somebody unmuting their microphone or something. All right. So
I had to cough. Sorry.
Oh, I see. So sexist men have psychological problems. I'll read a bit of this and then we'll look at the study. A psychologist looking at 10 years of data from nearly 20,000 men found that those who value having power over women and endorse playboy behavior and other traditional notions of masculinity, note the language here, are more likely to suffer from psychological problems and less likely to seek out help. Turns out that cultural norms that hurt half of society's members aren't too good for the other half either. Who'd have thunk it? The new meta-analysis, which was published Monday in the Journal of Counseling Psychology, synthesized 78 studies on masculinity and mental health gathered between 2003 and 2013. The participants ranged in age from 12 to over 65, and the vast majority were men. A little more than half of the studies involved predominantly white men, although some focused on African Americans or Asian Americans. Most of the studies did not ask respondents' sexual orientation, but among those that did, most of the participants were straight. Researchers then identified 11 norms considered to be traditionally masculine: desire to win, need for emotional control, risk-taking, violence, dominance, sexual promiscuity or playboy behavior, self-reliance, primacy of work, power over women, disdain for homosexuality, and pursuit of status, and looked to see whether they were associated with particular mental health outcomes. Note that all these 11 norms that are considered to be traditionally masculine are actually things that feminists describe as toxic masculinity: desire to win, need for emotional control, risk-taking, violence, dominance, sexual promiscuity, playboy behavior, self-reliance, primacy of work, power over women, disdain for homosexuality, and pursuit of status. In general, the men were struck more strongly In general, the men who struck more strongly to these norms were more likely to experience problems such as depression, stress, body image issues, substance abuse, and negative social functioning. They were also less likely to turn to counseling to help deal with those problems. The effect was particularly strong for men who emphasized playboy behavior, power over women, and self-reliance. Lead author Y. Joel Wong of Indiana University was not surprised by the results. It's not rocket science, he told Popular Science. It's something that's been demonstrated over 20 years of research. A growing group of psychologists are interested in studying toxic masculinity, the idea that some traditional ideas, apparently all of them, according to what you guys listed, some traditional ideas about how men should behave are harmful to men, women, and society overall. The point is not to demonize men. Somebody wants what? Bunny? No, nobody.
No, I
Okay.
was coughing and making notes, and I don't want to interrupt you
Oh, I
because
see.
you're on a streak.
Okay.
I honestly do mute wherever possible so I don't interrupt.
Oh no, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
The point is not to demonize men or the attributes some of them possess. It's more to understand how behaviors encouraged in men can be damaging for everyone involved. For example, one of the studies, and note that the link here, this is the study we're going to look at, cited in Wong's analysis, looked at 108 men who had been referred to a program for committing domestic violence. These men were disproportionately likely to embrace the norms of dominance and emotional control, as well as to say that men shouldn't share their emotions or ask for help. The authors of that study theorized that men with these values are more likely to take out anger and frustration on their partners rather than appear weak by seeking emotional support. So I think let's go ahead and look at the actual study that Mr. Wong put up so that you guys can see how, where the twist is at. So
I
far,
think it's already pretty twisted. I don't know. Like,
yeah,
I've
if you
already
guys have any initial
started
thoughts
making
on
notes.
what was written so far, feel free while I get ready to share the next thing.
Well, my overall thought going into this is obviously to explore toxic masculinity, and yet without a comparative body of evidence to explore toxic femininity, there isn't really a control, if that makes any sense. Are these human behaviors or are they gendered behaviors? And if we're going to focus on shit men do that are self-destructive and wrong, then we need an equal body of evidence, in my opinion, in terms of objective research, right? Just to get a full picture of things. We also need to do that with women, and not painting women as victims, but as this study and all the studies that they're citing are doing, as this is traditionally a gender conforming behavior that is considered toxic. I don't see a body of studies on traditional gendered behavior by women that is considered toxic. So that immediately raises my ears. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, you're going into this looking for a specific outcome that cannot be balanced by a comparable outcome for analysis. So to me, that immediately puts the feather in the heart off balance, and you get eaten by the crocodile. So going into this, I'm already like, you got to be real careful here, guys.
What you're saying is what we're looking at is it's an equation, and only one half of the equation is actually filled in, and the other half is completely ignored.
Oh, that's exactly my point. You have to balance the equation. And when you get into this and you start looking at the CMNI, that's the conformity to masculine norms inventory that is often referenced in here. They talk about risk-taking behavior in men, such as drinking to excess. But I don't see a lot of research going into women drinking to excess and the destructive results they may have. Oh, wait, because women still get a pass when they drink too much. And nobody wants to look at that, I think, because there is this men evil, women, well, we're children, right? So we know not what we do. And for me to take any sort of research like this seriously, I need to see opposing evidence. I need to see the other side of it. And I don't see the other side of it. So going into this, I'm already like, well, you're kind of just wanking in the dark here. Fundamentally, because we don't have enough on the other side to balance it out. If you're going to make it gendered, then throw down, brah, let's make it gendered. But you make it fucking gendered then, don't you? And we do both, right? And with no disrespect to trans people, I mean in terms of male-female dynamic. And I don't see that here. So please continue. But as for the study of men in domestic violence, again, we can't have opposing or even complementary evidence because how many women are arrested for domestic violence? We can't even fucking study it.
Mm-hmm.
So there are so many things wrong with this going into it, just in terms of falsifiability or null hypothesis. And I've referenced this before, but you have to have the other side of it if you're intellectually honest. So anyway, please continue.
No, I gotcha.
Yeah.
Also, before I get into we start looking at the study itself, it wasn't easy to get this study. And I think that's worth pointing out, because while the Washington Post has a link to said study, you can't actually look at it. You can only look at the abstract. And then you have to, I think it's behind a paywall, but when Bunny tried to buy it, she still couldn't access it. Through a university.
Yeah, I couldn't get it through the university. I couldn't get it privately through the APA directly. It raises my eyebrows when I can't get it through my university key, because I have access to a ton of shit behind paywalls, right? And this, I could only get the abstract. And if you only look at the abstract, it sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Right?
I can actually read the abstract that Bunny got, which is actually seems not the same as this one.
I know.
Let me see if I can find it. Yeah.
Yep.
Let me see here.
What you're getting is my university database abstract.
Yeah. So it's a different abstract. And that's just all like super fishy shit. I mean, you know.
Well, and if the Washington Post is going to publish something, the study they link to should be accessible. And that's because as I was, I've been waiting to ask this of Teal, So when you were in school, if you tried to write a paper and all you could cite were abstracts, what would happen to you?
Oh boy, yeah, no, you would. I'd be surprised if you were still allowed on the course.
You'd be the Wicker Man, is what would happen.
How'd it get burned?
The bees.
They're in my eyes. Yeah.
Not the bees. No, it's true. It's true. You can't. You need to be able to access these things. So anyway, please continue. I'm sure chat is very curious about the actual article.
All right, so let's look at the study itself.
Before we go in, I'd just like to point out a couple of things about the article. Just before we get into that, we can section this off and never look back at the god-awful article. I couldn't have noticed, the article is basically saying things which are not in this study at all.
Mm-hmm.
They have sort of taken a reading of it which is completely different from what the data actually indicates. One thing which I find very interesting is, in this article, they actually stick in brackets the term toxic masculinity and toxic, and all these things. These words don't actually exist in this study. Toxic masculinity is not referenced in this study once. The word toxic is not in this study at all. You can word search it. The only time you find the word toxic is in the word intoxication, which was a study looking at drinking rates.
Yep.
That's it. So you can already see how the Washington Post has kind of manipulated what's being said here. And then what I find really sort of interesting, and actually a little bit dishonest on their part here, is they were sort of talking about the meta-analysis, and then like halfway through they sort of suddenly tangent from one example of one of the studies cited, and then they look at a case of domestic violence. Like they're kind of like then separating that one thing out from the actual meta-analysis. And then it's kind of like, so people who are violent disproportionately think that they can be violent towards people. Fucking duh.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, people who are violent think it's okay to be violent.
Yeah.
Color me surprised. Yeah, I needed a study to tell me that.
Oh, and this is the whole thing that's running through my head, Teal, is by the very conditions that they're trying to connect with mental illness, they are by definition parts of mental illness. So they're creating dominoes that they're now going to knock over and act all proud that they knocked them over.
Yeah.
But they've already set it up that they cannot fail.
Basically, yeah.
It means nothing. It means nothing. In my opinion.
No, I pretty much along the same lines. One thing which I will mention, which I don't know if I want to save it for when we get into the actual thing. We've already spoken about the conforming masculinity norms index. One of those things that we're going to find is this is a very bizarre view of masculinity, insofar as we'll read through it and we'll see the I can't remember the number of traits. It was either 11 or 14 or something like that.
The one I read was 94. The one I read was 94. They actually,
wow.
they actually went into more detail. But the sample size was fucking 800 people. So
Yeah.
it's like, how many times has this been cited? And it's 800 fucking people. Like, that's a pretty
This is
small
another
sample
thing that
size by my
happens.
eye.
Masculine freedoms, 94 items, yeah. But then they look at, I'm thinking of the subscales where they've got
Yeah,
11 distinct I'm thinking
Yes,
of
yeah,
dimensions, yes. That's the part which I'm kind of interested in, because we're going to look through that and you're going to realize it's a very, very warped view of masculinity insofar as it seems to be informed very much from someone's subjective opinion, because if you consider historical gender roles, you can question a lot of these. And that's all I'm going to say for now. I'll go more in depth into that when we actually get there, because I don't want to derail it, so we can...
It's all right.
I don't want us to jump around. We can go in order and make sense.
Okay, so I'll put the study back up, and here we go. I'll read the opening bit. Despite theoretical postulations that individuals' conformity to masculine norms is differentially related to mental health-related outcomes depending on a variety of contexts, there has not been any systematic synthesis of the empirical research on this topic. Therefore, the authors of this study conducted meta-analyses of the relationships between conformity to masculine norms, as measured by the Conformity to Masculine Norms Inventory 94, and other versions of this scale, and mental health related outcomes using 78 samples and 19,453 participants. Conformity to masculine norms was modestly and unfavorably associated with mental health, as well as moderately and unfavorably related to psychological help seeking. The authors also identified several moderation effects. Conformity to masculine norms was more strongly correlated with negative social functioning than with psychological indicators of negative mental health. Conformity to the specific masculine norms of self-reliance, power over women, and playboy were unfavorably, robustly, and consistently related to mental health-related outcomes, whereas conformity to the masculine norm of primacy of work was not significantly related to any mental health-related outcomes. These findings highlight the need for researchers to disaggregate the generic construct of conformity to masculine norms and to focus instead on specific dimensions of masculine norms and their differential associations with other outcomes. Okay. So, what are we going to look at first? Do you have any specific section you want me to go to? Bunny or teal deer?
No, it's pretty long.
Yeah.
So
that was the thing that I was thinking about. And let's see. Maybe there's a bit where the actual the present study. We can do this, I think.
Okay. Well, the first thing that I want to note here, it comes up in the actual data where they reference the meta-analyses, but it is actually right here on page one of the first notes which I've made on this second paragraph, starting correspondence concerning. But if you just follow that paragraph down, I suppose it's probably actually the third paragraph, starting O'Neill 2012.
Oh, here we go.
So O'Neill 2012 found strong evidence that masculinity-related constructs are positively associated with psychological problems across diverse samples of men and women. Now that kind of stood out to me, and we'll see why when we actually go and look at the things. It's in these meta-analyses looking at masculinity-related traits, you're measuring women. One thing which I find really, really interesting is in the positively correlated examples later on, looking at the proportion of the results that they found relative to the studies, you are going to have found women who were exhibiting those traits and therefore being negatively affected by them as well. So calling them masculine traits therefore seems to be somewhat a misnomer, because clearly they are exhibited by women and clearly they are then negatively affecting those women as well. So why are these traits, what makes them inherently masculine?
exactly.
It seems that what makes them masculine is simply the assertion of the person who has labeled these things masculine. You should probably just be looking at them and saying, what kind of behaviors have potentially damaging outcomes?
Oh, but we got into this with them.
Because throughout this study, they find these things, and they find some of them have damaging things, but other times they have positive correlations as well. So they're kind of all over the place with this a little bit. They kind of eke it down in a way that they get what they want out of it, and I think it's a bit misleading and dishonest.
I tend to
Remember,
agree.
women can be toxically masculine as well, because women are masculine as fuck.
Yeah. Well, unless what this reminds me of a study that we looked at a couple of weeks ago, I think, and in it there was like a list of what are deemed to be masculine traits and deemed to be feminine traits. It was the one about the sperm banks, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's
what
what
I mean.
they're
The BEM index. Yeah.
yeah, and I wonder if that's what they're using to determine what masculine behavior is. Playboy behavior, putting your work first, being what are these things again? Because I don't think these are specifically masculine, but I think they're being marked that way.
Yeah. Playboy nature.
Yeah. So the correlated with power over women, which that's kind of a strange phrase. Self-reliance.
That's
Go
what I
ahead.
was saying. Is it power over women or power in general? Because
Yeah.
they are not the same thing. But if you're looking at somebody who considers himself an alpha male, whatever you want to go with that, but if they consider themselves powerful and they like having power over things, is that power over women? Well, by definition it is, because it's power over everything. But we'll just classify it as power over women, shall we?
Are they viewing this
I,
as?
I do think they are considering the male tendency to desire high social status, which is something we know men tend to desire because it's what women actually find attractive in men. So therefore, they've taken men desiring high social status because women tend to be attracted towards men who have equal to or greater social status than themselves. So therefore, by that definition, men are higher on the power hierarchy, or generally you'd expect them to be, than women on the average. But does that mean that they have power over those women?
Exactly. It's so clever.
Very manipulative in phrasing, and I'm not a fan of it, because again, it's okay, power over women, but if they've got high social status, they have power over everyone. So
Yeah.
And
Plus,
that's what I
women out of it.
that's what I get from this as well. And when you can take any trait and expand it and exaggerate it to extremes that would be considered in the realm of mental illness. I mean, any trait. You can take fucking altruism and take it to an extreme, and then you've got a martyr complex. So to me, studies like this they don't have there's nothing for me to hang my hat on or sink my teeth into, because I can do that with any trait. I can do that with anything.
Yeah.
I can do that with nurturing. I can do it with collecting. I can do it with cleanliness. I can do it with grooming. Like, yeah.
I mean, you can make the argument, if you wanted to, that if TLDR's translation of what power over women is could be, where you have men that seek higher status because women tend to be attracted to men who have higher status, you could even make the argument that that's actually women's power over men, to make them chase things that may be outside of their interests in order to find something or have a better chance with something that is. So yeah, I mean, this power over women thing is a really sketchy phrase. Besides, do women who have because if they were testing women for traits of toxic masculine traits, and would they also have power over women as one of the things? Would women do that to other women?
Oh, they wouldn't include that.
No,
as a
of course
thing.
not.
No, that wouldn't be
Of course
included.
not.
One thing I would point out, actually, really quickly before we move on about this, these three traits which they're picking out as being the ones which have the highest correlation to mental and psychological problems, throughout this paper, I at no point found anything about a fail state. Because if you're failing at having a social status that you desire, if you're failing in, Playboy, if you want to take multiple partners and you're failing, if you're failing at being self-reliant, as in you're dependent on other people, that's going to cause people to have mental illnesses and mental problems. That's the sort of stuff which can lead to things like depression and alcoholism. So it's not the traits themselves which have caused that, it's failure to acquire them. So if you acquired them, would you still have that problem? Potentially, but potentially not. So
That's a good point.
They seem to have completely missed out of this study the concept of a fail state, because a fail state can cause these problems as well. It's not necessarily the trait; it's the journey towards the trait.
Yeah, that makes
something
sense.
to think about.
Yeah. No, absolutely correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And
so,
but this is what I'm saying. Any state from a certain slant of light, you can correlate with mental illness. So you want power over women, you're a dominant sexist. you don't have power over women and you're upset about it, well, you're also a sexist. You're just not a successful one. So
Angry, entitled,
like,
crying, man baby sort of
exactly.
thing.
Yeah. So, and this is why this study makes my head hurt, because this is exactly the kind of research, and I use that term in the loosest possible way, makes my head hurt, because it's not, you can make it say whatever you want. And I try and use my powers for good, but were I on the dark side of the force, I would be writing these for a living, because they're so easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's so easy to make the data say what you want it to.
It's true.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess we'll look at the study itself. All right. Against this backdrop, we sought to conduct a series of meta-analyses on the relationships between conformity to masculine norms as measured by the CMNI and mental health-related outcomes. We focus on the CMNI because it is currently the only published measure of conformity to masculine norms written in English. All right, well, let's stop right there for a second, because they said they focus on it because it's the only one that exists. Now, what is the CMNI? I think, Bunny, you were talking a little bit about it. That was
it's a conformity to masculine norms in inventory,
mm-hmm.
and it's I've read it. Teal's read it. It involves traditionally what is considered traditionally masculine behaviors. Sample size was about 800, if I recall correctly, and but again, it's largely opinion based. So
right.
There you go.
So this is probably not the best thing to draw from, you would argue, and it's the only one, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's good. Right?
I wouldn't give it a ton of weight, again, because it's to me it's so biased. Risk-taking behaviors, like I said, risk-taking behaviors such as drinking too much, well, they're being considered a masculine trait, but you must consider the bias of your audience as being subjective, and perhaps people just don't like to think about what happens when women drink themselves into oblivion. Mm-hmm. Because women don't do that. And when they do, it's not their fault, because their boss left them alone in a bar.
Yeah.
And then they got in trouble. So
or they're just, even when women do it, they just call it masculine behavior. So it's still men's fault. They're just engaging in it.
14-year-old, I was drunk, man.
Yeah.
Like so I don't think we're considering these things, and I don't think the researchers are considering it either. But yeah, so I don't give it a ton of weight myself. But it's definitely cited a lot, so yeah.
Yeah, well,
the weight that you should give this is really not very much. I mean, okay, kudos to you for trying to catalog this sort of stuff. You know, that great. You're trying, but the bias with which it's been assembled is ridiculous. And when we actually read through it, I'm just going to point out all of these examples. I mean, we've already covered risk-taking and drinking. You can apply all of these to women as well as to men. You know, you can find masculine and feminine examples for these things. And I do think that a lot of these are set through a lens. And I don't know which lens I want to call it, because even just like general historical knowledge can point out exceptions to this. But we'll read through it so that everyone's actually knows what the CMNI is, what the 11 indices or whatever it was they decided to call them are, and then we'll talk about that, I suppose.
All right.
I would love to see one of these where they evaluated the same behaviors objectively, as in not based on lived experience, but as in terms of observation, and then correlated them to how many women engage in it and how many men engage in it, and then correlate it to negative outcomes and comorbidity of mental illness, and then maybe we have something we can actually think about.
Yeah. That is the best way of doing it. Actually just look at what people do, how often they engage in that behavior, because that's one of the best ways of finding it out. Which I find it really weird why some people then like to throw away other data points. You know, like those OkCupid and Tinder things, you know, where people like to throw out that data and go, oh, that's not proper studies. Like, so watching what people are doing without them knowing that they're being watched and seeing what they actually do is in no way a proper indicator of what people actually do. Really? I'm glad that you have just
thank you.
single-handedly dismissed the entire intelligence agency, the entire concept of spying and espionage, everything to do with psychology that we know.
How much have you had it drilled into me about research bias and how when you're conducting a study, sometimes you cannot tell people things because you will influence the outcome.
They are being watched because then they will
Exactly.
change their behavior. That's the definition of doing it wrong.
Thank you.
The less people know about how involved they are in a study, the better.
Exactly.
This is what even if you just give them a complete false flag and just say, "Oh, we're just measuring how you talk to each other. We're going to be looking at your eye contact while you're mingling and talking," and then you get to the end, it's like, "Aha! We lied. What we were actually looking at is how many glasses of alcohol you ingested in a social situation and comparing that to what you normally do." Yeah.
There
Even
you
something like that, because it takes their mind off of what they're potentially being watched for. But
Bingo.
whatever.
Anyway, as we continue to this
Let's continue.
study.
Yeah.
We focused on mental health related outcomes in this study because they are the most widely studied topic in the psychology of men and masculinities, and also have important practical implications for clinical practice and for individuals' well-being. To ensure that a broad spectrum of studies were included in our meta-analyses, we adopted Key's conceptualization of complete mental health, which does not equate the absence of mental illness with the presence of mental health. Keyes also included psychological well-being and social well-being under the conceptual rubric of mental health. In support of this conceptualization, a factor analysis of positive indicators of mental health and indicators of mental illness in a national study of the U.S. adults identified a two-factor model reflecting the latent variables of positive mental health and mental illness. Therefore, following Keyes as well as previous counseling psychology meta-analyses involving mental health, we treated positive mental health and negative mental health as original or orthogonal construct. Furthermore, we included psychological help seeking as an outcome in our meta-analysis because it is also a mental health related outcome and one of the most widely studied constructs in the psychology of men. In sum, we had three broad sets of outcomes in this study: positive mental health, negative mental health, and psychological help seeking. The predictor variable in our meta-analysis was conformity to masculine norms as measured by one of the versions of the CMNI. Given prior evidence of the bi-factor structure of the CMNI 46 in a U.S. mixed sample of college and non-college male adults, we examined both the total score as well as the subscale scores of the CMNI in our meta-analyses. Okay. They had four main goals in the study. And although they had used the three perspectives as a framework to guide their research questions and moderation effects, these perspectives are not competing hypotheses. Therefore, evidence for one perspective does not imply a lack of support in the other. First, they estimated the direction and magnitude of the relationships between conformity to masculine norms and our three sets of mental health related outcomes. Based on the broad empirical literature on masculinity and mental health, we expected conformity to masculine norms to be unfavorably associated with mental health and psychological help seeking. All right, so let me just jump to what they actually did. The method. Whew. All right.
Yay!
A member of what? Go
Sorry,
ahead.
I was just going to say I don't know if you're familiar with Keyes's theories and idea of total mental health, but it's like a holistic thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where they also consider your relationship with your community and your interpersonal relationships. This is pretty standard in healthcare. You look at I made a video about it. They do consider what's your relationship with your family? Do you do any volunteering? Things like that. But what I find interesting is, again, they're kind of tipping their hand a bit here, because when you are using that in this context, men tend to be less community and social oriented in the same ways as women. So if you are using that to determine a signifier of mental health, a man isn't likely to say, "I have 20 best friends."
Right. They tend to be more individualistic.
I've got like one really good friend, a bunch of drinking buddies, and other people I chat with. I don't know. Like it's so I wish I could be a fly on the wall to see what their actual criteria were.
I mean, yeah, when men are, well, I wouldn't say men. When people are really self-reliant, that doesn't just mean
Which
that
is a
they're
bad
less.
thing.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
doesn't just mean that they're less dependent. It also means that they tend to be just fine alone. They don't necessarily care about their social status as much. It's not as big a deal to them. They're less concerned with that because they're happy in their being alone or with a small group of people or what have you. So.
Yeah, can we just point out again for people who've just tuned in that self-reliance in this particular study is being considered a negative thing?
Yes.
A negative masculine thing? Self-reliance, it's bad, guys.
It's toxic, apparently.
It's toxic. Wow.
Being an individual. And I think the reason is because feminism is, and I know I'm going back to this, but I do think that feminism is definitely playing a factor in this. It is a collectivist ideology. Mm-hmm. So if you're not part of the collective, then something is wrong. You're not thinking about everybody else. Why are you only thinking about yourself? It's selfish. You shouldn't do that. Being selfish is bad. Are you reading an Ayn Rand novel? How well, you should be burned at the stake. So yeah, or Ayn Rand. I know. Anywho,
it's okay. I'm breathing now. Okay, yes, go on. No, there's so many things to point out in here, but this is such a fucking clusterfuck. Like I can't even, and I can't even with this study, and there's so many things we could point out, but we don't have 5 hours. So let's continue on and get the good ones, the juicy ones, the juicy teal deer zinger ones.
All right. So a member of a research team identified the empirical studies that examine the CMNI and mental health related outcomes to be included in our data set. First, this member conducted a preliminary literature search for both journal articles and dissertations and theses in our 4 electronic databases: Google Scholar, PsycInfo, PubMed, and Medline. Using the keywords conformity to masculine norms. The exact phrase conformity to masculine norms was used for the Google Scholar search because of a large number of hits the search yielded without the use of quotations. Why are you telling us this shit? I'm gonna jump ahead because
page filling.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay.
What this means is they had a word count that they needed to hit.
Yeah.
You don't need to write down in any sort of academic study like why you bothered putting quotation marks around a search or something like that. It's pretty much assumed that you're going to be searching for keywords and you're reasonably competent at it. This is just padding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is just to make it long.
And to say, see, other people think like us too. See.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not a good. That's not a.
Searched our things, and we found too much information. Oh.
Yeah. Oh. Do you remember berries? Do you remember? Do you remember what? Remember? Do you remember when the scientific process was to go against other people and like try and discover new things? Do you remember?
Oh yeah, I remember.
I remember.
That is good old time.
Anyway, continue. Please.
Those were the old days.
I feel so old now.
I know. I'm right there with you. Maybe.
All right.
If you remember, I'm there.
So I guess I'll jump ahead to where they actually found something.
Yes.
Okay, so
keep going.
About 5 pages then.
The
I
following
was just gonna say, keep flipping. Keep flipping.
The following variables were coded. A 2-hour training session was held. No, who cares? All right, data analytic plan. The meta-analyses
were... So a 2-hour training session, is that the part where they're writing about what they did on the Sunday before they sat down to actually study the data? So I had a 2-hour training session, and then I went out for some steak, and it was pretty good. When I saw a movie, damn, that really put me in the mood to crunch some numbers.
And that's what I did for my summer vacation. Okay, so data analytic plan. The meta-analyses were conducted using SPSS macros developed by Wilson. The Pearson correlation was used as our measure of ES, with the exception of our analyses involving specific dimensions of conformity to masculine norms. We used the CMNI total score to represent the construct of conformity to masculine norms in our analyses. If the CMNI total score, so this is the table, overall characteristics, number of samples, What is this CMNI conformity inventory?
I would like to take us up one page so that, or did I lie? Was it 2 pages?
Down 2 pages? Forward?
No, up one. I'd like us to actually tell people what exactly is on the CMNI before we look at the sample characteristics.
Okay.
Because I think that's kind of important so that people actually know what exactly the conformity to masculine norms index, or was it index or inventory? Inventory.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's kind of important for them to actually know exactly what is on that, because this is a fucking gold mine of hilarity.
Yes, it is.
So,
It is.
Yeah, it's page 2, and it's the second
Page 2?
paragraph down, starting. Yep. Furthermore, the conformity to masculine norms inventory.
What did I skip it? Page. Oh, here we
Page
go.
2.
Page 2. All right, and it starts with furthermore.
Furthermore, the conformity.
Furthermore, the Conformity to Masculine Norms Inventory 94, which was developed to measure individuals' adherence to masculine norms, encompasses 11 subscales corresponding to 11 distinct dimensions of masculine norms. Winning, emotional control, emotional control, risk-taking, violence, dominance, playboy or playgirl, self-reliance,
No.
primacy of work, power over women, disdain for homosexuals, and pursuit of status. Several factor analytic studies have provided support for the hypothesized factor structure of the CMNI 94 and the CMNI 46, a briefer version of the CMNI 96 that corresponds to its subscales. The sheer number of subscales makes this measure an ideal assessment tool to address differential effects of conformity to masculine norms on mental health-related outcomes. It is therefore entirely conceivable that conformity to some masculine norms might be associated with psychological distress, whereas conformity to other norms might not.
Alrighty.
Yep. The subscales. You can have 8 million subscales, and if they're all as bullshit as that, they'll mean exactly the same thing.
Yep.
Wow.
So, I mean, okay.
Disdain for homosexuals, eh?
I don't know. I personally consider disdain for plebs to be a very masculine one myself.
That's right.
No, you are so biased, though. You are
I
so
know,
biased in this
I know.
respect.
I mean, my God, I want to stick 2 extra ones in there, which is eating steak and lifting weights. Come on, feminists, get on my fucking level. You don't understand toxic masculinity, yo.
It's true.
Do
I know.
you
Do you even
even?
lift, brah?
Do you even?
I got you first, though. Do you even lift? Do you even lift, bro? I'm in.
Get these deer
Alright,
gains.
So,
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. With that, forgive me. I never do this on stream, but this is so aggravating. I'm having a beer. So, slancha to all. This study is literally driving me to Pilsner. So, please continue.
I understand. It's fine.
Yes.
I will take the reins. You can get drunk.
On one,
is
you
that-
vastly underestimate my Irish heritage.
Yeah, you-
So,
Was that toxic masculinity of me? I'm encouraging you to get drunk while I take control of everything.
I think it is,
God
and it's
damn it.
also
I think-
toxic
I think
masculinity that she's going to get drinks in the first place. So-
it's true.
Which one of us is more masculine at this moment in time, Bunny?
Me,
I
of
can't
course.
tell anymore.
It's me. I'm drinking the beer.
Alright.
So clearly it's me.
All right. Okay. On to the actual study. We're gonna get there, because otherwise we're gonna side tangent
Yes.
into the silly place, because it's
Which-
much better to be in
It's
than
so happy. It's so much happier there. But please,
is.
go.
Okay,
All right.
so it is conceivable that conformity to some of these masculine norms might be associated with problems, whereas others won't. Okay, so this kind of blows out the whole toxic masculinity from A, the original article, and B, general existence. Because what that suggests is that the toxicity of these traits is not inherent, it's situational. So sometimes when you're engaging in these behaviors, it's going to be good, sometimes it's going to be bad.
Yep.
As Bunny said earlier, taking anything like this to excess can eventually end up being harmful to you regardless, because extremities are very rarely ever good things. And then 11 distinct dimensions. So what they've got here is they've basically got a shit ton of assertions of what is a masculine thing. Now, a little bit of historical knowledge will blow pretty much all of these out of the water. Winning, not exactly a inherently masculine thing. Women do give a shit about winning. They have senses of social hierarchy that does exist. as we've said before, and that kind of covers the whole power over women thing as well. We know that women socially hierarchy themselves in the same way that men do. Primacy of work. That's kind of 1950s of you feminists. You know, you're reaching back into the 1950s. You know, that time where there was a mysterious lack of men in the populations in Europe and America because most of them were fucking dead. So when they came back, there weren't as many jobs, so they got all that extra work. All the job basically started paying more because they were desperate to snipe people because of the reduction in population. Before that, men and women both used to work, and they both used to work really fucking hard. So a lot of women would have prioritized working in that time. So that kind of blows that out of the water. Disdain for homosexuals as like stereotypically masculine. Right. What really masculine nations do we know from the past? You know those Spartan warriors, those really hard nut people who used to practice pedestry. It's totally legit to jack off using the thighs of a young boy. Yeah, they had a lot of disdain for homosexuals with all of their
intergirl sex.
And yet they were actually a very pro-masculine society. With you know, they were the sort of men best at everything kind of thing. And they had no disdain for homosexuality. It was seen as like pretty fucking normal for them. So where are they getting this from? These are not universals. These are time and geographical specific thing, which I find so bizarre that we've got feminists who are picking this when one of their favorite counter arguments to things like evolutionary psychology or biopsychology is, well, I found one example of like 200 people in the deepest, darkest arse end of absolutely nowhere that's not even on a map, therefore it's disproven any sort of universal claim about human behavior, even when it still kind of fits in there. It's just a bit of an anomaly. But then they come up with shit like this, which is just assertion based on very sort of limited criteria with no sense of universality or considering any sort of other culture or other time period or anything like that. And yet that's one of their favorite defenses.
Yep.
I apologize for sticking my nose in earlier when you were on your magnificent rant, Teal. But with respect to primacy of work, and you're referring to 1950s and women, define work. Because if you consider work, at one point in history anyway, it was homestead and family. Have you looked at the Romani women and the pride they take in their household work? Have you gone to someone's house and criticized a woman's, like how she keeps her house or her cooking? If she takes pride in that, it's not going to go well for you. So, and a great many women, if that was their work, if child rearing and making a nice home and supporting her husband was her work, God help you if you criticized it. So and again, I'm getting back to the Irish, a lot of pride in how you keep your house and a lot of pride in how you keep your family. It may be culturally different as time passes, but there's primacy of work is a female trait, definitely. But define work. Do you mean work outside the home? Or do you mean something you're passionate about and invested in, and that's what you spend all your time doing? So I actually find primacy of work as a masculine trait quite anti-progressive. So
I like that point. That is a good point.
Problematic, guys. It's problematic.
I endorse this point.
Thank you very much. Let us continue.
All right, so I'm looking at the table here. This shows the samples by gender, male 4, female, or sorry, female 4, male 71. I'm not sure what these numbers correspond to, but it says samples were classified as mixed if the authors did not report separate effect sizes for female.
Those were the individual studies. They have 78 individual studies, and these were the focuses. So 71 of the studies contained exclusively men.
I see.
4 were exclusively female, and 3 of them were
a mixture of both.
Yeah. They say, oh, they didn't report, but that's probably because it was mixed. So again, this brings up what I said earlier. They're talking about these as masculine traits, but they're examining them in women. And then some of the results which they come up with later, if you kind of look at them a bit more mathematically, it starts being, well, how many of these traits were applied to those women? And yet you're trying to pass them off as masculine, which... Bleh. Does that then make that behavior masculine if both men and women engage in it? Well, I would say no. It makes it human.
I don't think I read this closely enough because it was a bit short for time, but Brian and Teal, perhaps you did they even establish a baseline of the kind of mean incidence of mental illness in the general population anywhere in here? Anywhere at all? Anywhere at all?
I did read it quickly. I don't remember that, actually.
Because that would be important.
Looking here.
Because I don't think they did.
No, that's just mental illness is a reference. Masculinity-related constructs of mental illness. Mental illness-related outcomes in the study, conceptualized under the rubric of mental health, meta-analysis of mental health. I'm not actually seeing baseline.
Yeah, I didn't either, because before you can establish these certain quote-unquote masculine traits as correlated with mental illness, you must have a baseline of general, like a control group, right? You have to have what's the general, not even factoring these traits, what is the general rate of mental illness in a population? Do they have a control group anywhere in here?
No, I don't see anything.
I didn't see one.
There is no control.
Oh,
if
for
there was
fuck's sakes.
If there was a control group, it would be in the results category, because it would have to be there as something to test against.
Oh man.
Yeah. Well, we can go through the results, I suppose, and I noticed they didn't do any Latinos. I'm hurt. There was no Latinos in the study. I know. Either that or we're all just sane. I don't think so.
Well,
no, they've got an honourable mention.
Oh, okay.
Somewhere. I actually put this in my notes. By admission of the writer, masculinity can be problematic or beneficial, and this depends on circumstance. And the quote that went with that was, the perspective also dovetails with recent advances in intersectionality scholarship as applied to men of color. For instance, the negative consequences of conforming to the masculine norm of emotional control might be less severe for Asian American men than for Latino American men, because emotional control is congruent with Asian cultural values that promote emotional restraint, but less so with Latino masculinity ideology of caballerismo. Is that how you say that?
Caballerismo?
That sounds probably more likely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I don't know how to pronounce this word. I'm far too British.
Manly men. It's okay. Manly men. Manly men.
Fair enough.
But so they've just said that these traits are not inherently toxic necessarily, but the mental health outcomes could be dependent on the culture. But instead of looking at the ways that culture could change in order to make these men less mentally ill, instead it's the men's fault.
Mm-hmm.
I've solved the study.
Oh, I knew that. I knew that was a
my God.
conclusion before I started looking at it.
Oh my God.
It's interesting. That's if you're writing the articles. The actual study suggests otherwise. But
it's modest.
We'll get there later.
It's modest, right? It's
very.
really small. I would consider it insignificant, frankly. But if you look at the article, it's like, no, yeah, we totally solved this, and like it's nothing anybody didn't know, guys. Nth meme. Oh my God. Okay, keep going. I'm gonna drink more. Go.
Machismo.
Machismo.
Results. We'll look at those. We examine the presence of, this is the preliminary analysis. We examine the presence of publication bias as a function of the type of publication for negative mental health, positive mental health, and psychological help seeking. No differences in ESs were detected between articles and dissertations and theses for negative mental health, positive mental health, and psychological help seeking. Furthermore, an examination of the funnel plots exhibited a distribution resembling an approximately symmetrical inverted funnel for all three outcomes, suggesting that publication bias did not adversely influence the meta-analytic findings. Because extreme ESs may distort meta-analytic findings, we explored the presence of outliers using the criterion of 3 standard deviations away from the mean. Well, what is the mean? We found only one, and the mean is claimed to be Cooper 2017. Maybe that's a different paper. I'm not sure, because that's the citation.
What, Cooper 2017?
Yeah.
So he publishes it next year.
Yeah, I'll give you the mean next
Okay.
year. Yeah, okay.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. We're referencing papers that clearly don't even exist yet because it's from 20. Are you fucking serious? You're referencing something from next year. I assume it's already been accepted and just hasn't actually been. I assume it's been written and accepted, but just hasn't actually gone into
Perhaps.
actual paper.
You can't
into
look
an
at it
actual
yet.
journal yet.
Yeah. Citation predicted.
I want
Yeah, exactly.
I want to find that. I'm sorry. I'm going to be a while. I'm going to try and track this down.
Okay.
That's
I'll keep
that's
reading in the
remarkably
meantime.
common.
I've just
Yeah.
searched it up. It's a book which seems to not exist yet. Hang on, no research. Anthony Harris Cooper. No, it's a paperback that was published back actually in the 2000s. I don't know why they've stuck 2017 next to it.
That is weird.
I don't understand. What the fuck am I looking at?
It's a glitch in the matrix.
Possibly.
I just had deja vu.
Exactly.
It
Again.
happens when
Oh
they
my
change
God.
something.
Did you see the girl in the red dress? Oh no, no. Okay, yes, we need to finish this. Wow.
All right. Only one
All right.
outlier for the relation between conformity to masculine norms and psychological help seeking, and no outliers for the other outcomes. However, after contacting the author of the study with the outlier ES, he clarified that there was an error, a missing negative sign, in the correlation reported. After correcting the error, there were no further outliers. Using meta regression, we also tested whether ESs for positive mental health, negative mental health, and psychological help seeking varied as a function of the reliability alpha coefficient of the CMNI measure reported. Across all outcomes, we found no evidence that measurement precision based on CMNI alpha coefficients affected the magnitude of ESs. Okay, so let's see. I want to try and get to some results. There's a lot of gobbledygook and filler. So
Yeah, it's academic wanking. So just continue on. It doesn't matter. It's fine.
all right, omnibus tests,
Here we
correlation
go.
between conformity to masculine norms and mental health related outcomes. Do you see the table I'm looking at? So this is the table. Negative mental health, conformity to masculine norms. They have a K, R. I'm not sure what these are. I almost thought of reproductive strategies for some reason.
Yep.
And 95% CI, Q, and I to the second power. What the fuck? I don't know
Those
how
are just
they.
the distributions.
Oh,
So,
here
like,
it is. Yeah, they explain
Yeah.
it. The distributions. Okay. So the I2 test, which quantifies the percentage of the total variability in all studies attributed to between studies heterogeneity rather than to chance. I2 equals 100% times IQ, or no, IQ minus DF divided by Q, with larger values signifying higher percentage of heterogeneity. I2 values of 25, 50, and 75% correspond to low, medium, and high degrees of heterogeneity. So according to this is where it is right here. Negative mental health, conformity to masculine norms, 53%. Conformity to specific dimensions of masculine norms, 73.4%. So apparently the specific dimensions of masculine norms they may be referring to, this is negative mental health. Okay, so these are probably the what are the ones that they pointed out were the worst? The Playboy behavior, the
power over women. Don't forget that.
yeah,
Power over women.
homophobia,
Yeah.
power over women, and Playboy behavior, right? So
Yes, master. May I have another? There you go.
yes, and so I guess these are the specific dimensions, and that's higher than the conformity to normal dimensions, the 52%. And then in the positive mental health category, people who conform to masculine norms, 76%. So that's not bad. So I'm not really sure what they're saying. Like the article is making the claim that sexist men have psychological problems. That's basically their ultimate thing, and then they relate it to things that this study doesn't even talk about, like domestic violence. Right? It's not even in here, is it? I haven't seen it.
No, it's related in the CMNI, right? So it's
Yeah.
referenced as a reference. So it's like one step out.
Yeah. And so when you look at the positive mental health in the study, I don't know what the K is. Maybe it's the number. I don't know. The conformity. I'll look at that real quick before I go back, because they should have something in here that tells me.
Tables. There should be tables, really.
They really should. Okay. Cohen's guidelines were used to categorize the magnitude. R values of 0.1, 0.3, and 0.5 reflect small, medium, and large ESs, respectively. So that's what the R value is. As shown in Table 2, conformity to masculine norms was significantly and positively related to negative mental health, as well as significantly and negatively related to positive mental health. So it's related to both of these things. ESs for both analyses were small. Conformity to masculine norms was also significantly and inversely related to psychological help seeking, with this relationship exhibiting as a medium ES. The Q statistic was significant for negative and positive mental health, which I already looked at. Q, let me see here. We computed the I2 test, which I already talked about. To address our second research question, based on the outcome-centered perspective, we tested moderation effects of conformity to masculine norms based on specific types of positive and negative mental health outcomes. The Q stat was significant for negative mental health, implying differences in ESs as a function of the type of negative mental health. Given our hypotheses that the ES for negative social functioning would be stronger than that for psychological indicators of negative mental health, we reanalyzed the results by comparing negative social functioning with negative psychological health. In support of our hypothesis, the link between conformity to masculine norms and negative social functioning was significantly stronger than that between conformity to masculine norms and negative psychological health. In contrast, the Q statistic was not significant for positive mental health. This non-significant finding remained in a reanalysis in which positive mental health outcomes were classified as social well-being versus psychological well-being.
I have to say I'm not surprised at all that conformity to masculine norms relates to not seeking psychological help, considering when you go to get psychological help, they tell you to, they shame you or tell you to man up or treat you like a woman. So, I don't know. That doesn't surprise me at all. Just put that out there.
There seems to be very little taking into account the actual social ramifications of what they're implying that they're looking at here.
Exactly.
If you want to measure, like, someone's the effect that someone will have in a society, or the society's effect on that person, you have to be aware of what that is. So, is a man seeking help for mental health the same as a woman seeking help for mental health? Well, we know that the answer is no.
But what exactly does that mean? Because I would consider men going on a voluntary military exercise as potentially a form of therapy. I would consider men going camping for 2 weeks by themselves as a form of seeking psychological help. So, or does it have to be in a certain way? Does it have to be talked through?
Of course it has to be in a certain way for them, because they can't accept the idea that men and women have different ways of functioning and handling things like stress and emotional outlets and whatnot. That doesn't factor in to them.
A better question is, do you have a coping mechanism for psychological self-help?
Yes.
And that would change the game. Or do you have to sit in somebody's office and listen to how you need to talk about your feelings all the time? Really? And would rather be getting a root canal.
Yeah, when they say like psychological help seeking, is that what they mean? Therapy? Is that the only way you define it, or are there other ways that you can define that?
Well, it's seeking help, so I would assume that by definition that requires other people to be there.
Yes.
But that could be...
I would assume.
Yeah, no, for sure. But what I'm wondering is that the difference between seeking professional help, like a therapist or a psychologist or whatever, or just, maybe participating in some activity with friends in order to help, that's not professional, basically. Or maybe even like going to see your priest or, your coach or whatever, something else, basically.
I know someone who deals with their depression, a man, by carving things and getting them installed at bars. Like he carves bar tops and he carves old school chair backs and stuff. And he gives them to bars. And it gives him a tremendous focus and pleasure seeing people enjoy what he's put his time and effort into. And that's how he copes. I would consider that psychological self-help, you know?
Yeah.
So, but it's not. It's not, because you have to sit and you have to talk about how you know, you wet the bed when you were 2, and that's what happened. You can't actually focus on results, can you? And yeah, it makes me crazy because so many people are not getting help for what they need,
Yeah,
men
that's true.
specifically. But that's perhaps another show. But yes,
Mhm.
so I
Okay.
just, yeah.
Yeah, so let's see. There's a couple of other things here. In contrast to negative mental health, only 4 of the 11 dimensions of conformity, those are the ones we listed earlier, to masculine norms were significantly and inversely related to positive mental health. That is, emotional control. Wait, isn't that stoicism? Isn't that not good? Playboy. So this is related to positive health?
Inversely related.
Inversely. Okay.
yeah.
Self-reliance and power over women, whereas winning, violence, dominance, primacy of work, disdain for homosexuals, and pursuit of status did not exhibit significant effects. Interestingly, risk-taking was favorably and significantly associated with positive mental health. Similar to negative mental health, self-reliance exhibited the largest ES in its association with positive mental health. The ES for the association between the 11 dimensions and positive mental health ranged from 0.12 for risk-taking to negative 0.3 for self-reliance. As for psychological help seeking, there were insufficient ESs to analyze dimension differences for risk-taking and dominance. However, all but 2 of the remaining 9 dimensions of conformity to masculine norms, primacy of work and pursuit of status, were significantly and inversely associated with psychological help seeking. The ESs range from less than 0.01 for pursuit of status to negative 0.3 for emotional control, which was the only dimension to attain a medium ES overall. Overall, these findings provide strong support for the predictor-centered perspective, namely the link between conformity to masculine norms and mental health-related outcomes differed as a function of conformity to a specific type of masculine norm. All right. Finally,
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so some are beneficial and some are not.
yes.
Circumstantially and relating to what environment you're in. Okay, great.
And-
How do you intend to take any sort of action on this whatsoever? You've basically said nothing.
Exactly. And with respect to emotional control, when you look at emotional control, I do think that men naturally have different emotional responses to things. Even look at our tear ducts, right? This has already been established. However, how many men have an artificially imposed emotional control because they're told their feelings aren't important? And that isn't even touched on here. How many men have learned to have emotional control because nobody fucking cares anyway? And that would be my question in my mind. If that is related to negative mental health outcomes, well, I think you're looking at the wrong end of the horse. Because you're looking at the result, the symptom, but you're not looking at the cause.
Mm-hmm.
That's what struck me with that. So, yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Hey, if I'm wrong, tell me.
No.
It's just that what they are finding here is really not very much, and there's people trying to draw conclusions from the data that isn't there.
Oh, especially when you look at the Washington Post, yeah.
Yeah, and there is a lot of inference here in this. I mean, it's just bizarre. There really does seem to be just this. They have a very distinct idea of what they think masculinity is, and it's such a subjective thing that it's basically worthless. I mean, they're talking about like social dominance and all this sort of shit. No, you are aware that throughout a lot of history, a lot of men have been quite content and actually perpetuated the norm of know your place. You know, there's a reason why things like patriarchal-centered religions have rules like respect your parents.
Mm-hmm.
That's not be socially dominant. That's know your fucking place. Know who's better than you and fucking show them the respect they deserve.
Filial piety, everything they call it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're looking at like Teal Deer was saying, we're looking at a study that there's not much that's very useful here, and it's not necessarily like, you know, they tested women as well as men, and they found that these. I think that there's a lot of problems here. First off, this 11 dimension of conformity to masculine norms, that's like, I don't know that that's good science there all by itself, because a lot of the traits, as we talked about before, are things that women also do. Especially these days. I think that's even more common. I wonder how old this 11 dimensions of conformity to masculine norms is as a concept, and if it doesn't need to be revisited. Because that actually is likely the thing that the Washington Post and Christy Winters was holding on to use as evidence of why toxic masculinity and the patriarchy is the problem. And not that, you know, this is a human thing. And yes, they tend to be things that men do more, but they're not male. Like men don't own this kind of behavior.
Yeah.
So
they are not inherently gendered behaviors by any stretch of the imagination. They're taking human behaviors which, yes, are predominant in perhaps one gender more than another, but then they are using a behavioral preponderance in certain groups to then state that is basically then a function of biology, which, no. That there are biological bases for preponderance in behavior, but they haven't established this link between these to that.
Yeah.
And we can do that.
Not thoroughly, no.
Yes, like we can do that, absolutely, in certain ways, but the way that they are just defining them is so wishy-washy, and as I've said, very circumstantially dependent. Men have not feared homosexuality throughout all of history. It's been very celebrated in some places. Feminists love pointing that out when it suits them.
And not when it doesn't. Yeah. What I find interesting is... sorry, go on?
No. You go ahead, do your thing.
Go on, Derpy Doge. Oh, okay.
I got something else.
You got a long one. Okay.
Yeah.
I find it interesting that when you are first introduced to feminism, which neither of you necessarily have, but I was front and center in the infantry for some time because, you know, Canada. And what you were introduced to is this idea that it's the they. They are forcing these patriarchal gender norms. They are forcing them on us, and they're the enemy, and we need to smash the patriarchy, tear down the walls of gender conformity. Nothing holds us back but our chains, blah, blah, blah. And yet, all the studies coming out that are from that perspective, all they do is reinforce fucking gender norms. Reinforce stereotypes of masculine and feminine behavior instead of looking at a gender neutral, or even if you account for the genders, do both, right? Or try to make it somewhat equal. But no, it is the feminists who are saying they're dividing us, and then they divide the genders, right? And it's total double talk out of both sides of their mouth. And that's what, over the past while of studying this, I've realized that they really don't want, they being the feminists who are advocating for this kind of thing, they being people who write this kind of thing, they being the universities that approve and peer review of this kind of thing and give grants and say yes to this and no to things that might show women in an unflattering light. Which happens, by the way, of course, if you didn't know. But it is that rhetoric that is actually creating a gender divide. Because let's just say I was a feminist by the actual dictionary definition. My goal would be to show that we're not so different. We can achieve equivalent things. That would be what I'd be trying to prove. I would be trying to say these behaviors can be seen in both men and women. So let us not separate the two. Let us put us on more equal footing. You know, different, but you know, it's not like men are bad in this way and women are bad in this way. Let's get a more nuanced and overhead view. Let's do more research. But that's not what's coming out of feminism. We're getting more gendered rhetoric out of feminism, which is what completely blows my dictionary definition out the window, doesn't it? Go on, Doge.
Oh, I wanted to point out one other thing. There is a section in this study that is titled "Limitations and Implications for Research and Practice." So they point out that how their study is flawed. And despite the contributions of our findings, we acknowledge several limitations on our study. First, our meta-analysis focused only on conformity to masculine norms and mental health-related outcomes and do not generalize to other masculinity constructs and outcomes such as health behavior, example, physical exercise. Second, because our meta-analyses consisted only of studies written in English, it is possible that we might have excluded studies written in non-English languages. So basically studies from other countries whose primary language is not English. Third, the studies in our meta-analyses were based on correlational data. None of them involved the experimental manipulation of variables that would enable researchers to draw causal conclusions about the contingent effects of masculinity on mental health-related outcomes. Additionally, given the paucity of longitudinal studies in the psychology of men and masculinities, we could not test whether ESs differed as a function of the temporal sequence of conformity to masculine norms and mental health-related outcomes. So there's more, but I want to stop on the correlation thing because I was thinking about that. It was one of the comments that Skeptor made under the original article. So I'm going to give credit to Skeptor here because he did make a mention. Now, I don't know that Skeptor looked at the study, but he did read the article. And he said that the way the article frames it, you could say that 100% of people who like to eat cheese have killed themselves in the shower. So, but that doesn't mean that eating cheese leads to slipping and killing yourself in the shower. And so that this is... I mean, this is pretty suspect, you know. And I'm glad that the people who made the study were honest enough to point that out. I don't know that the people who made this were maybe they didn't have an agenda per se, but they're probably working with some pretty faulty stuff, like the 11 dimensions of masculine norms list.
I don't think they have an agenda. I think they're just working with what they've got. Mm-hmm. And then realizing that what they've got is very limited, which is why they are basically saying, what we've got here is a bunch of correlation. That's it. It might not be linked in any way whatsoever. Or it might be like a third or fourth variable, because they even say, look, we don't have access to the original things to play around with the variables. So it might be like a third or fourth thing that is actually causing the correlation, and that once you normalize for it or remove it or factor something in, it'll go away.
Yeah.
So they're basically saying it's not that this study is completely worthless. It isn't. It's just a stepping stone. Well, no, it's a stepping stone towards another thing. Like even studies where you end up like this. It's like, okay, I've got a load of correlation. Well, okay, I know there's a load of correlation. The next time I revisit this, I can attempt to work out what variables we need to change. You know, you can start looking at the individual studies and testing more validity of it, and hopefully eventually find out that what you're saying is complete nonsense.
Mm-hmm. But that's the problem, is we've got correlations based on citations to correlations, based on citations to correlations, and there's nothing challenging these things.
And there's no control.
And there's no control, and there's nothing challenging it in a head-to-head academic arena.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's not going to be either. I
know there isn't. And by the way, chat, seriously, I'm not a feminist. I was extrapolating if I was a feminist by the dictionary definition, okay? Don't mass unsub.
Come on, guys.
Come on, guys. It's hypothetical, right?
Okay. Let's go. Fourth. So is another one of the limitation. Fourth limitation, some of our moderation analyses were hampered by sampling inadequacy. Because our samples consisted mostly of men from the U.S., our findings are not necessarily generalizable to women and to non-U.S. countries. Similarly, across all outcomes, our moderation analyses could not address comparisons involving adolescents and older adults because there were insufficient samples for these groups. The majority of studies did not report participants' sexual orientation, which drastically reduces the number of studies available for moderation analyses. So if they didn't include the sexual orientation, I believe the Washington Post pointed out that they didn't use gay men in the study. But according to this, they didn't actually record the sexual orientation of the men or women in the study at all. So that would have, then what does that say? That actually discredits it even more, right? I mean,
potentially. It basically, we know that the Washington Post is full of shit at this point. Recording their sexuality is kind of meh for most of what they're saying, but considering that one of their really big things is disdain for homosexuality, if you're going to assert that that is a trait of masculinity, you need to be, working out whether you've got gay people or lesbian people in there.
Yeah.
Because if they are then scoring high or low on that, that might tell you something, or might just prove that you're full of shit.
Exactly.
It will probably prove that you're full of shit.
Yep.
Collectively, these concerns.
They then have internalized
homophobia,
faggotry, or something.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. Collectively, these concerns point to the need for more research on conformity to masculine norms among individuals from diverse groups and countries. Fifth, our significant moderation effects involving demographic variables have to be interpreted cautiously because they do not explain the underlying psychosocial mechanisms that might account for the varying amount of conformity to masculine norms on mental health-related outcomes. Beyond demographic categories, future research should address how variables associated with social identities, such as racial identity, sexual identity, perceived racism, acculturation, and social class, interact with conformity to masculine norms to predict other outcomes among individuals from diverse backgrounds. For instance, researchers can address whether experiences of racism accentuate the link between conformity to masculine norms and mental health outcomes amongst men of color. Sixth, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that's an interesting perspective, considering it's already been established that certain men who are in cultures that encourage masculine behavior do not suffer these mental health effects.
Yes.
Please continue to spread that out for those who may not have heard us earlier.
And while we're on the topic of culture, would you consider Islam to be a masculine culture? I think that on some level it kind of is, but maybe this is cancer. I don't know.
Do you want us to answer, like, for real?
Yeah, no, go ahead if you want to. I mean,
okay.
There's nothing off board here.
Okay, no. I think there are many aspects of focus, as in masculinity being what is running things and trusted to enforce things. Yeah. However, there is a ton of focus on women in terms of protection and keeping them a certain way and encouraging them to be faithful. And so I would consider a masculine culture to look more like, frankly, something MGTOW, right? Where men do their own thing and where women don't occupy a huge spot in their head. But since women in Islam occupy such a huge space in, the general headspace, and I'm assuming, the traditional Orthodox cultural grew up in it, not just I was born in Canada and, have been exposed. I mean, like, immersed in it. Women occupy a tremendous space in Muslim men's heads. So by that definition, I would say it is not a masculine culture because there is so much thought around women. It's not what I would consider positive or productive thought, frankly. But I don't consider, oh dear, forgive me. Okay. I don't consider a great many things with respect to Islam particularly positive or productive, frankly.
Oh no,
So-
I'm not gonna fight you.
Oh,
on that.
okay.
I'm not gonna fight you on that.
Okay, because I've never been asked on HPR before, so I'm like, oh shit. I'm glad I'm drinking. Okay, but no, I don't consider masculine in any way I would consider to be positive masculinity. Let's put it that way. And by positive, I mean men who are able to self-actualize and live free, happy lives. Let's put it that way.
Right. I mean, I don't believe that any culture that's organized under a strict sort of authoritarian, religious, theological authoritarian construct is particularly masculine. I think that because it's not necessarily driven by that. But Teal Deer, what did you want to chime in on into these muddy waters?
Pretty much. Oh, they're not muddy waters for me. We all know my opinion of Islam. It goes something along the lines of the words cancer and purge. But,
Because nobody's ever asked me on any stream ever what my thoughts are, and I thought that was deliberate on their part, saving their channel subs, because it's something that I'm actually quite passionate about. But okay, good.
That's fine, but I would agree. It as a culture, it is not masculine. It's just one which observes very sort of quite strict gendered boundaries, but within their own domains, each of the genders do wield quite a significant amount of power. I mean, you consider, for instance, that like one of the things that Islam very much encourages is, while they sort of say, oh, women must be beholden unto their husbands and all of that sort of stuff, there's also actually a line in the Quran, which I really wish I memorized, but I didn't, which is basically something along the lines of, no, a woman only has to be faithful to her husband so long as he is a true Muslim.
Oh, and all she has to do is find someone who will say her husband is not faithful to Allah, and then all of a sudden she does not. And he can also encounter trouble from his peers if his wife and wives, potentially, and daughters are not perceived as faithful. He can actually be beaten, and then that gets passed on to them. So, but how tremendously aggravating and stressful is it to be fully responsible for every single member of your household?
Mm-hmm.
And if they make a mistake, you are accountable to it, even if they're adults. So I would not wish that on anyone, male or female. So.
Yeah, agreed. I thought about it out loud because I also had seen articles and videos about British women who were basically choosing to date Muslim men because they find them to be more masculine than British men. And I didn't. This was just something that was going on in Britain. And I was also reminded of other stories I had heard where there were women who, they were Western women, and they were like, well, I like Muslim men because they are manlier, they're more masculine, they're more, they lead, they take charge, this kind of stuff. And I was asking myself, well, is that really the case, or is it just their perception of the case? Because I agree with you guys in terms of what it is, but I wonder why they see it that way. And so that was one of the things I was bringing up.
That's a super interesting point, Brian, because this is something I talk about a lot with respect to the BDSM community. And there's a can of worms for chat. There you go, guys. But because I think that more women are seeking out what is traditionally, and by traditionally I mean stereotypically, considered masculine, because someone who was considered normally masculine in the 50s or 60s even is now considered toxic. Mm-hmm. So women are having to go to greater extremes simply to get any taste of a man who doesn't ask her every 5 seconds how she's feeling, right? Because we don't, the whisper memes and shit say we want guys who ask us how we're feeling. We don't, okay? Not
just
every 5
girly
seconds.
Things.
Yeah, just no. No. And a lot of us like once in a while for you to order dinner for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or for us, just do it. Just order dinner for me, and we'll see what happens, right? And it's very dominant, and it can be very sexy. And I need a minute. Okay, no. But these are not things that are oppressive or harassing, but they are now considered toxic. So I'm seeing more women going to the fetish community for even a small slice of male dominance. And we're also seeing women going to traditionally machismo cultures looking for that as well. But it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It doesn't have to be cuck or I will make you my third wife. There is that happy medium in between. And for me, all it means is letting men be men and not getting offended every single time a man maybe looks at your tits. If a guy doesn't look at my tits, even instinctively for like 1 second, I'm like, that was odd. Because it's I don't even know if men realize they do it, but it's an automatic thing. It's like I look at hands and shoes and eyes. Mm-hmm. Hands, shoes, eyes, I know everything I need to know about you. And most men I interact with, they do the quick flick down and then up to my eyes again. And if they don't do that, I'm like, are you trying hard, or are you gay, or because that's an instinctive, like, animal sniffing each other's butts thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I kind of just expect it. But anyway, the point is, yeah, I think women are going to go to further and further extremes to find what used to be considered an okay and acceptable level of men being men. So
Yeah, I think it's sort of like this thing that these women were sort of complaining about is basically the outcome of what happens when you spend all day emasculating a group of people, and then men specifically, and on top of that they are mostly being raised by single moms, and on top of that you have the women being fed this line of what they're supposed to want in a man. And it turns out that it's none of it goes against everybody's biology, and it's not working out. And then they're like, oh, you know what, that guy with the beard, he looks really nice, and he seems like a man, this is what I want. And then they go get it, and then they don't like what happens after that. So so I still don't particularly think that Islam is a masculine culture. I think that it's actually very gynocentric in a lot of ways. And it's still just, it's just like any other, theological, culture. It's centered not on men specifically. It's not celebrating masculinity. It's still doing what it thinks it needs to do to survive as a culture, which is, it comes with its own problems. But the reason why I bring it up is by their definitions of what toxic masculine behavior would be. Many of those things are things that Islam is known for, such as disdain for homosexuals, just as one thing, which is part of their dimensions. But that's not something that's masculine, right? That's something that's in the culture itself. So
I need to address the chat. No, looking at someone's shoes is not to tell how wealthy they are. It's to see how clean they are. The same as the hands. I am a germphobe, guys. If a guy has dirty fingernails, he better be a mechanic, because he ain't finger fucking me with those filthy things. Just to be blunt, it has nothing to do with wealth. All right, it's cleanliness. Hypergamy.
Oh, it's all right. I guess I'll just continue on. Yeah.
No, I can't. Dirty shoes. It's a thing. I'm like, I can't do it. I can't do it. And this also might be a military thing. Like, if your shoes are dirty, it's like, how much disrespect do you have coming here having filthy shoes?
All right, well, now everybody wants to go clean their shoes.
Exactly.
Because who knows?
It's fine. I completely understand this. For spending many, many hours of bullying them myself, you're just like,
exactly.
No, it will be perfect.
No, it's true. I can't help it.
That little bit on the sole that doesn't actually touch the floor, you better be doing that bit as well. Because
I will
required to kneel down and that bit's dirty as well, and you've not been in the field, fuck you, you're doing it wrong.
Exactly. If you have never gotten out a nail file to get every fucking crevice around the eyelets, you do not understand, okay? It is cleanliness. That is what it is. It is OCD military.
It's not about penis size.
It is not about penis size. It's not about wallet size. Honestly, I got my own money. I don't care. It's fine. So it's cleanliness. I hate dirt. All right. Moving on.
All right, so the last bit. On the basis of our robust findings on moderation effects for specific dimensions of conformity to masculine norms, we argue that it is not particularly meaningful to discuss individuals' conformity to masculine norms in a generic sense. Rather, it is more useful to focus on men's conformity to specific dimensions of masculine norms. Although Levant did identify a bifactor structure for the CMNI-46, they also noted several weaknesses in this bifactor model. That is, the general factor in their model for the CMNI-46 explained that only 22% of the common variance in the items and 9 of the 46 CMNI-46 item factor loadings on the general factor were non-significant. In the same vein, Parent and Moradi raised concerns about interpreting the total score of the CMNI based on low intercorrelations among the subscales of this measure. Therefore, the question whether it would ever be appropriate to use the total score of the CMNI in research on individuals' conformity to masculine norms. So they question that. Instead, we recommend that researchers should routinely use the subscales to explore differential associations between specific dimensions of conformity to masculine norms and other outcomes. So we'll just do the conclusion, and then leave it at that. But it seems that what we're getting at here is that this study, while not completely worthless, the Washington Post is really stretching to try to use it to make some kind of argument. And Christy Winter, shame on you for not looking into it. Or maybe you didn't care. In conclusion, our meta-analysis of 78 samples and 19,453 participants provide greater breadth of coverage and depth of analysis of the relations between conformity to masculine norms and mental health-related outcomes than any previous single study or literature review on this topic. Which doesn't really say much if everything before this was shit. After all, conformity to masculine norms was significantly and unfavorably associated with mental health and psychological help seeking. Nevertheless, the substantial degree of heterogeneity in the ESs for these relationships highlights the need to disaggregate the generic construct of masculine norms and focus instead on specific dimensions of conformity to masculine norms and their differential associations with other outcomes. And that's the end of the study. And then there's a whole bunch of citations, which reference other things.
Some of which come from the future.
Yes.
Mysteriously. I still can't get over that. 2017. Okay.
Exactly. I
don't get how they pulled that one off.
I wonder how many other ones are from the future. Many of these are pretty recent, though. I guess that's not too awful.
But, well, no, that's also kind of a bit of a sign of the potential...
Sign of the times.
Yeah, it's a bit of a leaning... in some cases, recent studies can be very, very helpful, but we've also got a lot of recent taint, especially in like psychology and sociology, as the intersectional feminist hypothesis or assertion, as I just like to call it, the intersectionality assertion has just made its way so deep into the pyramid of citations that just roots through academia. It's not necessarily good that all of these citations are actually quite recent.
Yeah, it looks like the oldest one is from 2001 in this.
Okay, that's a bit old for general use. But here's, and Teal, I'm sure you'll have something to weigh in on this. Behind the research curtain. Step 1, decide what you want to prove. Step 2, prove it. Step 3, find things retroactively that will back up your opinion and then cite them in text. And this is not how science is supposed to be done. However, this seems to be how a lot of it is being done now. Yeah, just decide what you're going to prove it, and then find things that support it somehow.
Yes, that is what this does. I mean, I hold people to that standard on YouTube because, let's be honest, providing evidence for something you say on the internet is kind of as good as you're ever going to get. I don't expect anything more than that. But it seems like that is also the standard for academia as well now. No, generally what you'd want to do is start with your hypothesis, gather your data, analyze all of that data, and then maybe try and work out why it doesn't work. If you can disprove your own hypothesis, you did it wrong, but that should probably be your aim.
Just like creationists.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I'm not at a high level or anything, but a lot of the experiments I do, because I go in as blind as possible, I really do try and adhere to like the let's just see what happens. And a lot of times it does not prove my hypothesis, and I'm like, no, okay. Yeah, but as long as you're honest about it,
which is still like, well, this is what actually happened. I wonder if I can use this for something.
Thank you. And that gives you your next experiment, doesn't it? Because then you go, these are the variables I need to change. So let's do this independent variable, this dependent variable. Let's change these parameters. Let's try it again, and maybe we'll get something. And that is how you build a body of data on actual trying shit. Right? And not knowing if it's going to work. I said
this paper isn't complete garbage because it's basically just said, we found a load of correlation. There is no way of proving causation or even any particular link. There's a shitload of variables that they have absolutely no idea about, but, this could be the first study in a long line of 20 or 30 studies that eventually turns up something useful. But this thing by itself, if you're making any definite statements based on something in this paper, you're doing it wrong.
All right. Well, then, if you guys don't have any other thoughts, I'm going to close this out because I think we've gone through the paper.
I am good.
And yes,
Chat is hopping. Chat is very lively right now.
they are.
So-
I'm glad that they're having fun. I hope you guys enjoyed this analysis, and we really got in there and analyzed this
Analyzed?
paper.
But is it black anality? I'm still waiting for that, Teal. Come on. You're keeping me hanging. I'm so ready. I'm almost there. Come on.
You said hanging. Giggity.
It's
Yep.
giggity.
Your body is prepared for my black anality.
I am. You only need to make like a 3-second video at this point. I'm just saying. So I'm good to go.
I could invite you in for the experience.
There you go.
How about that?
Oh.
There you go.
If I promise not to fangirl, I won't.
Oh dear.
Okay.
Now the chat is full of fanfic.
Yeah.
Why did we do this?
Our
Little
chat's
pickle
always ready
jackalopes.
to ship various
This was
various
great, guys.
woodland
Thank you.
creatures together.
I wish we had a better I'm sorry. I wish we had like a more toothsome study. Because this was just because this was just like blah blah. This is what we've decided. There you go.
Yeah.
However, sometimes pointing that out is useful too, right?
And
So
but before we, got into it all, first we went out for coffee and I ordered a latte, but my friend got a macchiato and I thought, why did you get a macchiato? It's got not enough milk in it. And then
it's true.
after he got that, he insisted on a special kind of cinnamon for his macchiato. And then that's basically what's in this paper, right? And then we
That is
talked about
actually what some of
skateboarding.
these are like. That is actually what
I
these are
did-
like. I have
I
a
know.
paper about dildos and how they oppress women, and it is
I love it.
literally. I went to visit a couple of friends in India, and I wanted to go sex toy shopping, and then I got thinking about how oppressed they are. You have published your Tumblr blog in academia. It was peer reviewed.
Oh my god.
Wow.
So we need to start doing what if you're ever short for
Heresy! How do you get this nonsense published in academia? You filthy, vile Xeno scum! Be purged in the Emperor's name!
Speaking of purging in the Emperor's name, so continent why? No, someday if you're ever short for things to do, I swear to God, I get the campus newspaper. It is a lol cow. All right, so if you're ever short for things to do, I'll just get a campus news, and I will post articles from it because it's hysterical. And these are the people who are going to be doing your thoracic surgery. You're welcome. Sleep well at night. So.
All right.
Thank you so much, chat. It was wonderful. It's always a pleasure to stream with you, Teal, and thank you so much for having me, Brian.
Oh, yeah. This is our show. Teal's
I know
here as
it's
the guest.
Bunny and the
but-
Doge. It's Bunny and the Doge, but nothing rhymes with Doge, so I can't do this line. Yeah, no. I tried hard to find something that rhymed with Doge, and nothing does. But so.
Actually, we were
Yeah.
looking at Pinky and the Brain lyrics, maybe. I don't know. We'll be back. We'll get something down. Thanks, Teal Deer, for coming on. It was hilarious, and
It was great.
it was a lot of fun. And thank you, Bunny, as always. And thank you, chat. Also, before I go, I still need to sell about 80 tickets so that we can go to the Red Pill in Chicago. So if you're in the area and you are willing and able, I would like to meet you there. Come buy a ticket or two. Bring your friends. Bring your enemies. That's okay too.
Yeah,
They
that's
should see the
fun.
movie. And come check out the Red Pill in Chicago. The link is already in the low bar. And otherwise, we will be back next week, maybe with a video. I don't know. I'm looking at a new YouTube channel that someone sent my way. I think it was called like something Princess. I don't know. It's a feminist channel, and it's cringy. But I'm gonna go ahead and check it out. Anywho, and you know what? If you guys have some ideas for lyrics for the Bunny and Doge, you can put them in the comment section too. I'd be interested in seeing that.
Yes.
Anyways, we're going to take off now because I have shit to do. So I'll talk to you
Okay.
guys next time.
If